Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. When it comes to pure maple syrup, Vermont is the #1 producer in the country. Last season, Vermont sugar makers turned out a record-breaking 2.2 million gallons. The overall economic impact of the maple industry exceeds $350 million. Sugar makers rely on UVM Extension, the university's Proctor Maple Research Center, and the State Maple Sugar Makers Association for the latest information and technology to keep their operations up to speed. Those organizations host the annual Maple Conference. To learn more about the 2020 conference, I'm joined by Extension Maple Specialist Mark Iselhart. Thank you so much for being with us again, Mark.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back.
So when and where are the free 2020 Maple Conference sessions?
Sure. So, like everything, the way we deliver education in Maple in 2020 has been impacted. So we've moved online, and the Vermont Maple conferences will be a week of conferences. It'll start on December 6th, and it'll run until the December 11th. And there'll be a number of sessions. There's 16 individual sessions that are available. And sugar makers can, or anyone really interested in maple, can register. It is free this year.
Awesome. And that's moved from January into December, which is terrific because some people are starting the season earlier.
Right. Well, one thing the pandemic did is it sort of forced our hand. We were looking at changing the timing because, as you say, middle to late January used to be firmly before the season started. And now we're finding that people have already made syrup and are certainly tapping by that point. So the need to move our education up earlier, it was important. And then you have a whole issue of trying to find a time in the calendar when you can do it.
Right, and you did, and it's coming right up. And the week begins with a maple industry panel discussion. So tell us briefly about that.
Right. So this is one of the common presentations or discussions we have every year. And we typically will have a panel of industry experts. And we like to get in a diverse set of voices. So it'll be a little bit of research, a little bit of production, a little bit of the business side of the maple industry. So this year we have 3 panelists. We have Ed Fox, who's the CEO of Butternut Mountain Farm, which is one of the largest packers of maple syrup in Vermont and in the country. We have Appy Vandenberg, who is a research professor and assistant director at the Proctor Maple Research Center. And we have Jean Lamontagne, who's the executive director of the International Maple Syrup Institute. And that's an industry organization. It's international in that it has representation both in Canada and the US. And each of them are going to be giving a perspective on where we are currently in the maple industry, how we got here, and where the industry seems to be headed.
Awesome.
It's always well attended in person, and hopefully it will be online as well.
Maybe even better online. Who knows? So you always roll out some new workshops every year. So what's new on the agenda this year?
Well, we have one interesting topic. It's called Maple Telemedicine. We've actually asked producers to send in samples of syrup that doesn't quite meet the standard, and they're not sure why. So we're going to hope to diagnose the issues and provide some feedback to people. Unfortunately, there isn't really time for people to submit samples now, but hopefully they'll log in and learn something about what can go wrong and what the high standards are for making grade A pure maple syrup and how to avoid making mistakes.
Fantastic. And what are some of the other sessions that you have coming up?
Well, we have a variety. We really try to make the program appealing to people, not just at one scale of production. So it's not just targeting large producers, it's targeting people just barely getting into it as well. So we have people talking about how to lay out a tubing system for the first time. We have a whole block of presentations on the issues related to forest health and sugar bush management. So we have presentations on thinning in your sugar bush, presentations on how to adapt your road system to handle what we anticipate to be more erratic weather patterns and prevent against damage to your roads and damage to water quality. So that's really interesting. We have presentations on the business side and how to market your product. One of the nice things about maple is that producers who are interested in getting into marketing, they can market their product directly to consumers as opposed to something like milk, which makes it much more difficult to market directly to the consumer. So we
Great.
have presentations on the nuts and bolts of how to make your websites more appealing, how to do better online advertising, and how to get more consumers. And we've learned over the past several months since the last season that consumers are really hungry for this product. The sales we've heard have been very strong.
Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic, and what a broad reach you have with your workshops. And your work at the Proctor Maple Research Center is all about modern maple production. So, for the benefit of the general public, what is modern maple all about?
Sure. Well, there's really modern maple doesn't necessarily have to be large. It can be on a very modest scale, but it's essentially using modern techniques, which would largely fall under the category of tubing systems, applying vacuum to that system, using appropriate sanitation methods to make sure the tap hole is kept clean as long as possible, and then just acknowledging the various factors such as tapping practices and tree factors that go into maintaining really high yield. Someone who has only a few dozen taps can still adapt the modern methods of tubing systems that are tight and leak free, tap holes that are kept as clean as possible throughout the season. And really, we've seen that even on a small scale, people can achieve really high yields. It's a lot of work, regardless of how big you are. So people deserve the high yields.
Indeed. So, any other keys to the tapping part, and then we'll get to tubing?
Sure. So tapping, it's a really exciting time. It's a time when we're coming out of dormancy as far as the trees are concerned, and maybe a little bit as ourselves. And there's a lot of energy and activity around sugaring. There's also a time when people really want to get going and get a lot of things accomplished. Tapping itself is actually a really critical moment. Picking where you're going to put that tap hole in the tree is going to have impacts on your production all the way through the end of the season. So it's a little bit about taking a little extra time, taking that breath to look and see, are you really choosing an appropriate place to put in your tap hole? Because once you put the spout in, you don't really know with tubing how much that individual tree is yielding. It used to be with buckets, you could see exactly how much each bucket was providing. So there's a lot of go during tapping season, but we often encourage people to take up that little extra time, make sure they're putting in a good tap hole, and the yields are
will show.
Yeah, exactly.
So modern tubing seems to be more prevalent all the time. And anything we need to know about tubing these days?
Well, I mean, the basics remain the same. You don't want to make the tubing tight, straight, and downhill, and you're shooting for maybe 5 to 10 taps on what we call a lateral line. Those are the flexible lines that go from tree to tree. Main lines, when they're installed, they need to be on grade, maybe a 2% slope and tight. Anytime you have dips in there, it impacts the propagation of vacuum into the woods and into the tree. So it may not look like much to have a little dip, but when you see the sap coming into the sugar house or wherever your collection tank is, if there's like a surging or a really anything other than a nice, clean, even flow, it means you have some issues out in the tubing system and you're not getting the benefit of the vacuum that you could.
So also about yield, what are other major influences on sap yield?
So clearly, a good tap hole. It all starts with a good, clean tap hole. But other than that, tree factors. Tapping larger trees, we know there's a very linear relationship between the size of the tree and how much sap you get. So making sure you're growing good, healthy trees. The trees have enough room to grow and abundant sunlight. That's important. And taking out trees that are diseased and have an issue that are competing, even if they're still alive, competing with other crop trees that are maybe need more room to grow.
What is this compartmentalization business?
Sure. So under the bark, when you put in a tap hole, the tree responds to that wound. It's a natural process. It's the same as if you had an ice storm or someone backed into a tree. The tree is going to respond to that wound and compartmentalize that damage. And it does it through an active process where it takes some of its stored energy and devotes chemicals and physical boundaries to preventing a whole systemic infection. So think of it as a bit of like a scab on the inside. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately for maple producers, you just can't see that wounding from the outside. You can see the tap hole, but you can't see the staining that kind of extends above and below the tap hole. So when you tap into that stained wood, you'll get a fraction of the sap you normally would. So it's really important that you space out where your tap holes are, you avoid old tap holes, and it can really help.
So tapping, tubing, forest health are all workshops being offered by the Maple Conference Week starting December 6th. There'll also be discussions about adapting to change during the pandemic, which is huge for everybody. And you also mentioned that the workshops will be recorded. And you also offer a whole series of videos through the Proctor Center. So tell us how people resource those.
Sure. So there is a channel, the Proctor Maple Research Center channel can be accessed through YouTube. And we have a series of playlists. One of them is Keys to High Yield. And there we have a dozen videos looking at those critical aspects that impact yields. And they're really informed through research that we've done over the years and other people have done over the years.
Awesome.
And we've kind of boiled it down, if you will, to the real keys to high yield.
Well, Mark, we're all out of time. Before we go, we want to give a reminder for the 2020 Maple Conference Week. It's free. It starts Sunday, December 6th. And to get more information, to register and to check the website on your screen, it's vermontmaple.org/maple-conferences. Thank you, Mark Iselhart from UVM Extension's Maple. He's the Maple specialist there for the scoop on the conference. Thank you so much.
Happy to be here. Yeah, thanks.
And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.